Hillary Clinton cancels a campaign trip to California after being diagnosed with pneumonia. This is the moment pictures showed her collapsing in New York. Today, Donald Trump wished her well, but said there are health issues around the Democratic candidate. We'll be live in Washington, assessing what it means for her campaign. Also, this lunchtime, hours to go before a ceasefire is scheduled to get underway in Syria. But will it happen? The Education Secretary is expected to spell out controversial plans for new grammar schools in England. The DNA of an unknown woman is found near where Stephen Lawrence was murdered 23 years ago. Golds galore, more medals for Great Britain's Paralympians in Rio.
In the south, the Berkshire home gutted by fire, and the family who are rebuilding their lives from the wreckage with the help of the community. And rallying against Southern Railway, the commuters asking questions of the franchise.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Hillary Clinton has cancelled a campaign trip to California after being diagnosed with pneumonia. The Democratic US presidential candidate had to leave a 9/11 memorial service yesterday when she became ill and was filmed collapsing into a Secret Service vehicle. Her rival, Donald Trump, who has previously questioned whether she's physically fit to be president, today wished her well, but said her health was an issue. Our correspondent Richard Galpin reports.
Suddenly, the health of the Democratic Party candidate to be next president of the United States has become a headline issue in America. And this less than 2 months before the election. It was during a ceremony in New York yesterday in memory of those killed in the 9/11 attacks that Hillary Clinton started feeling unwell. She had to walk out of the event. And as she reached her vehicle, seemed to take a turn for the worse, stumbling, and then her legs buckling. Later she emerged from her daughter's apartment after receiving treatment for dehydration.
How are you feeling, Secretary Clinton?
Great, feeling great.
What happened? Just a second, give us a little statement.
It's a beautiful day in New York.
But her doctors eventually admitted she was suffering from pneumonia and had been diagnosed 2 days beforehand. And she's had other health problems. This is her emerging from hospital 3 years ago after receiving treatment for a blood clot on the brain after fainting and hitting her head. During her campaign this year, there'd already been signs that her health was suffering.
Every time I think about Trump, I get allergic.
Now, with pneumonia, she needs to rest and take antibiotics, raising questions about her run for the presidency.
I think from a visceral level, Americans do want their politicians to be healthy, and she's 69. But I think if they just come out in a straightforward way and said that she was ill, people would have been a lot more empathetic, rather than choreographing this in a way where she says she's fine and then hours later it emerges that she has pneumonia.
For all of the scandals in Clinton's closet, this could be a real impact on her campaign. This could be the moment where we start to see the race tighten. I wish that weren't the case, but I do think that video footage will harm her. I think it was quite frightening and she looked very unwell.
Her opponent, the Republican candidate Donald Trump, has said he hopes she gets well soon, but clearly intends making her health an issue in this election. Just last month he claimed, without having any evidence, that she lacked the mental and physical stamina to take on the many enemies the United States faces. The huge question now for Hillary Clinton is how long this bout of pneumonia will prevent her from campaigning in these crucial weeks ahead of the election. Her doctor insists she's recovering well and will soon be back in the fight against Donald Trump. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Let's speak to our correspondent in Washington, Gary O'Donoghue. And that is the question, how this will impact on her campaign.
Well, in a straightforward sense, she's got to take 2 days out of campaigning on the West Coast, today and tomorrow. At this stage of the race, that's a very serious thing, given how tight the polls are becoming. She's meant to be in Las Vegas on Wednesday, possibly back here on the East Coast on Thursday. The question is, will she be able to put up with those long flights there and back? And I think the other problem for her, and a bigger problem, is that throughout her campaign, throughout her candidacy, one of the issues has been whether or not she's trustworthy, whether or not the voters can trust her. Her numbers on that score have been low. And there's a danger, I think, here that the voters will think, well, look, where's the transparency here? This diagnosis was made on Friday. It was only forced out of the campaign when it looked like she was about to collapse. So I think those will be serious, serious questions for the campaign. And of course, for Donald Trump, he's already planted that seed previously about Hillary Clinton's health. This will play into his narrative, and he's now promised to release specific numbers, as he puts it, from a physical he had last week, later on this week. They'll want to keep this going, but they also know they don't need to work too hard because the rest of the world is asking, is she fit enough to be president?
Gary, thank you very much. Gary O'Donoghue there. It's still unclear whether rebel groups in Syria will observe a ceasefire due to begin this evening. Fighting continued over the weekend after a deal on a truce was brokered by the United States and Russia on Friday. Our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams reports.
Is this the storm before the calm? In Aleppo and Idlib over the weekend, an almost inevitable escalation of violence. Scores killed and wounded. No wonder that Syrians on all sides are sceptical. After 5 years of unending war, they've learned not to hope. Bombs from the air and fighting talk too. President Assad vowing to recover, in his words, every area from the terrorists. To drive the point home, he visited the Damascus suburb of Daraya, until last month a rebel stronghold, now back in government hands. This morning's prayers marking the eve of the Muslim feast of sacrifice, when the latest deal is due to take effect. The agreement calls for a week-long cessation of hostilities. There should be broad, unrestricted humanitarian access. And after 7 days, the US and Russia will start conducting coordinated airstrikes against the two main hardline Islamist groups. But on the ground, other rebel commanders have said they're not happy. The deputy commander of Ahrar al-Sham said that after all the killing and displacement, half solutions were not acceptable. The agreement, he said, simply strengthens the regime and undermines the revolution. Aid agencies have their doubts too. They've seen deals like this come and go while the country tears itself apart. But they need this to work.
My own instinct is that in the short term, which means over the next week, 7 days have been set aside to test the ground for this proposal. In the short term, there are good prospects of this being followed through. But beyond that, it's going to be a much more tricky enterprise, not least because the Russians and the Americans are meant to set up a joint command center to target ISIS and others.
In the devastated city of Aleppo, trapped civilians doing their best to celebrate the holiest day of the Muslim calendar. Russia says the next round of peace talks could take place next month. Much has to happen first.
And Paul is with me now. Is there any realistic chance that this ceasefire will start, let alone hold?
Simon, there simply isn't enough time to explain the myriad ways in which this could go completely wrong. I mean, obviously, from the start, the warring parties all suspect that the other side will use this pause as an opportunity to regroup and get ready for the next round, as everyone has done in the past. Assad's words this morning play into that fear that his forces, who've been on the offensive in recent months, might simply expect to continue with Russian backing. Even if the truce holds for a few days, a week, and no one should expect that it will hold completely, then the Russians and the Americans have got to do something they've never done before, anywhere. They've got to coordinate airstrikes against targets about whom there is still significant disagreements. So if they can do that, that would be a remarkable achievement in itself. Up to now, all they've done is essentially stay out of each other's way. Now they've really got to do something much more sophisticated. The rebels themselves, they're being told to distance themselves from one of these Islamist groups, the group once known as al-Nusra. Why would you do that? Why would you distance yourself from one of your main and most powerful partners at a time when you suspect that actually the Assad regime is simply getting ready to clobber you again? So they need guarantees and assurances. And at a political level, we're hearing lots of talk about the need for guarantees. Who is going to be targeted and who isn't? Who is who on the battlefield in Syria? And unless the Russians and the Americans can agree on that, and they have not done that in the past, then I think all the same problems that we've seen in the past are simply going to undermine this process again. This may prove different, but it feels awfully precarious.
Paul, thank you very much. Paul Adams. The extent of divisions within the Conservative Party could become apparent this afternoon when the plans for new grammar schools in England are outlined in the House of Commons by the Education Secretary. Let's go to our political correspondent, Eleanor Garnier. What are we likely to learn this afternoon?
Well, the plans will be presented to Parliament today, but really today marks the start of the consultation on all these changes in the education system in England. We've got a pretty good idea of what's on Theresa May's mind after that speech she gave last week. Some pretty bold, radical ideas like allowing more faith schools to open, encouraging independent schools and universities to support or even set up new state schools, and of course, most controversially, allowing existing grammar schools to expand and new grammar schools to open. Now, these changes are going to need legislation through Parliament, and with such a small majority in the House of Commons, that is going to be difficult because we know Labour and the Liberal Democrats oppose the plans, but also a handful of Tory MPs have been voicing their concern and criticising some of the ideas. In fact, those Tory MPs with doubts have been invited to Downing Street this afternoon to have meetings, I guess in a bit of an operation to try and win them over. But even if Theresa May does get some of these ideas through the House of Commons, she's then got to take them to the House of Lords, where the government doesn't even have a majority and is therefore likely to face trouble. So yes, this is a test about getting policy through Parliament. It's also a test, I think, about convincing people that these policies will deliver on what she's promised, a country that works for everybody and not just the privileged.
Eleanor Garnier, thank you. The leader of the TUC, Francis O'Grady, has warned businesses today that they'll have no place to hide if they treat their staff poorly. Last week, Sports Direct announced it was ending zero-hours contracts for people working in its stores in the wake of a long union campaign. And today, the courier firm Hermes is being investigated as to whether they pay the minimum wage. Our business correspondent John Moylan is at the conference in Brighton for us. John.
Simon, the growth of insecure work and casualisation is a big theme down here this year. Once upon a time, unions found it pretty easy to represent workers in big car plants or factories, but the world of work is changing fast and unions are having to respond. Sports Direct, named and shamed for Victorian working conditions, the firm is now ending the use of zero-hours contracts in stores after a sustained union campaign. Hermes, the delivery firm, now facing a possible investigation after claims that its couriers make less than the minimum wage. They're both companies that rely on casual labour and insecure working practices, which unions say are becoming more widespread. Today at Congress, the head of the TUC had this warning for rogue firms.
Any greedy business that treats its workers like animals, you're next. If you run a big brand with a dirty little secret, a warehouse where people don't even get paid the minimum wage, a fleet of couriers who are slaves to the app, let us put them on notice. We're on our way, delegates. We're coming for them.
Sophie Shaw is a waitress at one of London's top hotels. She's endured years of insecure work.
It's zero-hour contracts, you don't know how many hours you're working from one week to the next, you don't know where your tips go, and it just means that you don't know whether you can pay the bills at the end of the month, you don't know whether you can pay your rent, you don't know whether you can put food on the table. It's very insecure work.
But for some, casual work isn't a problem. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Steve Rowe is a driver with the taxi firm Uber. He's relaxed about being self-employed and not having any basic workers' rights.
I don't want to be a worker. I want to be independent. I want to be able to drive when I want to drive. I want to be able to work on my projects when I want to work on my projects. And with the Uber platform, I have total flexibility.
Young workers are in the front line of casualisation. Unions know that protecting people in the workplaces of the future will be a huge challenge. Well, today the TUC has launched a campaign to try and sign up more of these young workers. The aim, of course, is to ensure that they're not exploited in the workplaces, but also they know that not enough young people are actually joining trade unions, and that, of course, could be a big problem for them in the future. Simon.
John Moylan, thank you very much. Detectives investigating the murder of the teenager Stephen Lawrence 23 years ago have launched a new witness appeal after the DNA of an unknown woman was found near to where he was killed. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports.
A notorious racist murder. The BBC's Crime Watch programme has returned time and time again to the fatal knife attack on Stephen Lawrence in 1993. There were 6 people involved, only 2 have been convicted, so today there is a new appeal. This bag strap was found close to where Stephen was attacked in Eltham, South London. After re-interviewing witnesses, police believe it may be significant. New forensic techniques have been used on it. The conclusion? It belonged to a girl or a woman. Detectives need to find her.
One small little bit of information can bring it all together. I still can't understand seeing somebody at a bus stop, not knowing the person haven't done you anything, and yet you and your friends decide to pounce on that person and take their life.
Police are also focusing again on this CCTV from a shop near the murder scene that night. Notice the man's jacket, the distinctive V shape. Witnesses saw someone with a similar jacket nearby when Stephen was attacked, resulting in this police drawing. Detectives believe this man might have seen something. They're trying to trace him.
The original Stephen Lawrence investigation was a much criticised failure, and the Met is still, in some ways, picking up the pieces, looking at evidence it may have missed, developing new lines of inquiry. But the message today is that this investigation is still very much ongoing. Tom Simons, BBC News, at the Met's West London headquarters. It's just after 1:15, our top story this lunchtime. Hillary Clinton cancels a campaign trip to California after being diagnosed with pneumonia. Coming up, the bravest of steps. Claire Lomas uses a bionic suit to complete the Great North Run.
In South today, unhappy campers, the couple who say they were scared to go to sleep after getting robbed at Bestival on the Isle of Wight. And Portsmouth's Lauren Steadman crosses the line to take silver at the triathlon at the Rio Paralympics.
There were 8 more golds for Britain's Paralympians on day 4 of the Paralympics in Rio. The gold rush came with 3 golds in the rowing, 2 more in the velodrome, 2 on the athletics track and 1 in the pool. Well, the British team have now won a total of 23 gold medals and 56 in total, as you can see, putting them in 2nd place overall. Well, with all the latest news, let's go to our sports correspondent Andy Swiss, who's in Rio for us now. Andy.
Yes, Simon, welcome to the British team headquarters here in Rio, where they've had plenty to celebrate over the weekend. 8 more gold medals yesterday. It all started in the rowing and the cycling and finished off in the athletics, where Richard Whitehead defended his 200 metres title in some style, as Patrick Geary now reports.
Out on his own, Richard Whitehead is a runner with 2 blades, but most importantly, the edge. An edge which transformed him from marathon runner to sprinting champion 4 years ago. An edge which allowed him to win it all over again, aged 40. Just as it seemed this would be a scrap, Whitehead made it so gracefully carefree. This will be his last Paralympic T42 200 metres, so he gave himself time to enjoy it, win it, then kiss it goodbye. But look behind the leading man and find another hero in a British vest. That's Dave Henson, who lost his legs when he trod on an IED in Afghanistan 5 years ago. His is a bronze made from iron will. Jo Butterfield came to disability sport through wheelchair rugby. She must have some pass on her. That was 22 metres 81, a world record in the women's club throw and a gold medal. So often the Paralympics is about conquering fear. Bethany Firth was scared of getting in the water as a child. Now the pool is her home. The Northern Irish swimmer already had 2 golds to her name, 1 for Ireland in London, 1 for Britain in Rio. Make that another in the S14 200 metres freestyle, together with a silver for the 2012 champion Jessica Jane Applegate. Earlier, the now traditional British medal factory of the velodrome was productive once more. Laura Turnham and guide Corinne Hall won the blind individual pursuit, and Jodie Cundy, already a time trial champion here, powered the men's C15 sprint team over the line in a world record time. Gold to Cundy, John Allen Butterworth and Louis Rolfe. There was also a golden hour on the Lagoa. First, Rachel Morris won the arms, shoulders, singles, sculls event. Then Lauren Rolls and Lawrence Whiteley took the trunk and arms mixed double title. And the mixed Cox Fours gold made this Para-GB's best rowing performance on a day when Rio's podiums were crowded with Brits. Patrick Geary, BBC News.
Yes, what a day for the British team yesterday. And I'm delighted to be joined by one of the gold medalists from yesterday, cyclist Jodie Cundy. 2 gold medals at these Paralympics. Jodie, many congratulations. First of all, can I just ask you a slightly strange question? Could you please rattle the medals for us? I don't know if you can hear that at home. They make quite a sound. Can you just explain why they make that rattling sound, Jodie?
Yeah, so in addition to the braille we've got on here for the visually impaired athletes, they've also decided to make each of the medals sound differently. So the gold, silver and bronze have got a different rattle to them. So you can tell the difference even if you don't know what the colours are.
Well, Jodie, many congratulations on your 2 gold medals. 2 events, 2 golds. You can't get much better than that.
No, I mean, that's far cry from what I had in London, which was a lot of swearing and a bronze medal. So, yeah, to come away with a Paralympic record in the kilometre, and then we broke the world record twice in the team sprint alongside Louis Rolfe and John Allen Butterworth. So, yeah, superb kind of finish to the track cycling. There was 8 gold medals from our team, and basically continued on what the Olympic team had done in that same venue a few weeks back.
Yeah, I expect you're probably sick of being reminded about London 2012, where, as you say, you were disqualified. You got rather angry with the officials. How much, though, did that spur you on here?
That was all my motivation for the last 4 years of training. So all those sessions where you wanted to get up in the morning and you didn't really want to do anything, that was the motivation to get me up here. And to have these 2 gold medals around my neck or whatever was definitely worth every second of work that I put into it.
Did you feel, though, a little more pressure because of what happened in London?
Coming into the Games, I didn't think I had that much pressure. I thought I'd put all my demons aside from me when I'd won at the World Championships in previous years and stuff. But I got on the start line, going off last with a full house and cheering, and all of a sudden I forgot everything I was doing, and all the thoughts of London came flooding back on the start line. So I don't actually remember much of the kilo other than pressing down on the pedals, getting out, making a massive sigh of relief that I'd actually got out of the gate in one piece, and then I kind of rode, and it wasn't until the last banking I think I actually switched back on and realised I was in the middle of a race and I needed to do what I normally do. So yeah, it probably wasn't the best performance in like literal performances that I've done, but it was enough for the gold medal. And yeah, I managed to relax in the team sprint yesterday and really enjoyed that one and kind of flew around the track with the other guys.
Yeah, your 2nd gold medal in the team sprint yesterday, how sweet was that?
It was an amazing thing. I mean, like the team sprint, we haven't been sort of near the top for a long while, and then we found a new team in March. We won at the World Championships there in a world record time, and yeah, to break the world record in qualifying, we thought that was doable, but then we had a little look at what we can change in the final to try and make it a little bit faster, and somehow we managed to find 4 attempts, which was a huge amount, and was enough to take the gold by quite a substantial margin over China. So I think they just fractionally beat us in London by a few thousandths of a second, and John Allen Butterworth was in that team that won the silver, so he was gunning for gold, and yeah, that motivation kind of spurred him on and spurred us all on to try and win that gold yesterday, and it come off nicely.
And we saw you celebrating with your family afterwards. What did they say to you afterwards? How sweet was that?
I think they were all just relieved and stuff. They seem to have been through the ringer more than I have. Like they have to deal with it, and like I know watching friends and when they were at the Olympics and stuff, you get nervous for them. So God knows what they must feel like sat on the line waiting for me to do the performance. And yeah, until you cross that line, it's just nervous. So yeah, I think there's a lot of relief going on, and certainly you seemed it on their faces when I came up to them. But it was all smiles yesterday, lots of hugs, lots of kisses, and yeah, I think they're properly happy.
Well, Jodie Cundy, many congratulations. So yes, more possible success for Britain in the next hour as David Weir goes in the final of the 400 metres, Simon.
Swiss, thank you very much. And you can follow all the action from the Paralympics across the BBC. There's live commentary on BBC Radio 5 Live. The BBC Sport website will have the latest throughout the Games, and you can sign up for medal alerts via the BBC Sport app. More than 200 religious leaders, including the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, have written to Theresa May urging her to do more to help refugees fleeing war-torn countries. They've signed an open letter calling on the Prime Minister to overturn rules which prevent families being reunited in the UK. Our Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly reports.
Haldoan Zalana fled Syria, lives in Glasgow and is fighting to stay in the UK. He arrived here illegally, and he describes how he's been told to leave because the authorities here do not believe that the woman and 5 children he's living with are his family. He says he's willing to take a DNA test to prove he's telling the truth.
My children are my life. They are in my heart. I cannot live without them. I have to sleep next to them, eat with them, and drink with them. This is my family. How do you expect me to give up on my family?
Like thousands of others, Haldo in Zalana says he paid people smugglers to make his escape to Europe, in what faith representatives describe today as this unfolding human catastrophe. The UK has pledged to take in 20,000 Syrians from refugee camps by 2020. Today, an official report said the government would need to speed up the process to meet this target. And representatives of many faiths gathered at a synagogue to denounce the UK's response as too slow and the numbers being allowed in as too low.
There is a simple practical step that government can take. It can relax some of the regulations about admitting refugees who have family in this country, who can guarantee that they have a network when they arrive, and that's achievable within a foreseeable time frame.
In Glasgow, Mana Zalana is waiting to find out if she'll be facing life alone with the children. 10-year-old Ahmed says he likes the city because there are no aeroplanes or fighting. The Home Office won't comment on individual cases like this. The faith representatives say that too many families are being kept apart because of inflexible immigration rules, and that turning people away doesn't solve the problem, it simply shifts the burden. June Kelly, BBC News.
An estimated 1.8 million Muslims from around the world are performing a ritual known as the Stoning of the Devil at the Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca. It's a journey that every Muslim is expected to make at least once. But there are risks in having so many people at one site. Last year, 2,000 people lost their lives. Our correspondent Amy Cole reports.
Quite simply, it's the largest gathering of people in the world. Held in the city of Mecca, Hajj enters its final stages. An estimated 1.8 million pilgrims make their way back to the Grand Mosque from Mount Arafat. The stoning of the devil takes place in the city of Mina, just east of Mecca. Here, pilgrims collect pebbles and throw them at three walls, a symbolic gesture that represents the rejection of the temptation to disobey God. Hajj reached its high point on Sunday. The pilgrims praying at Mount Arafat before sunset, viewed as the most important ritual of the pilgrimage.
I hope God will allow for everyone to be here.
It is very nice to be here. It is not possible to understand this event without being here.
Saudi officials are on high alert following last year's mass stampede which resulted in thousands of people dying. But there has been some controversy. Iran could not agree with its regional rival on safety measures and so refused to send its 64,000 pilgrims, who instead gathered to pray in Iraq's holy city of Karbala. More than 100,000 Saudi troops have been deployed across holy sites in Mecca, and so far the extra safety measures seem to be working. Amy Cole, BBC News.
Now, for many of us, the idea of running a half marathon would be daunting enough. So this woman's achievement is particularly stunning. Claire Lomas completed the Great North Run despite being paralysed from the chest down after a riding accident. Using a bionic suit, it took her 5 days. Oh, and did I mention she's pregnant as well? Our correspondent Frankie McCamry reports.
She's been nicknamed the Bionic Woman, and this weekend, crossing the finish line, Claire Lomas became the people's winner of the Great North Run.
That was incredible. I won. I never win. I usually, I've only done 2 others, but I always come 2 steps and everyone's run off. So to come through there and then be able to enjoy the rest of the day is just amazing. And no one needs to know it's a 5-day head start today. I won.
Well, Claire did actually start the race from Newcastle to South Shields last Wednesday, walking 3 miles a day, raising more than £20,000 for charity. The 36-year-old is paralysed from the waist down after a horse riding accident 9 years ago and uses a bionic suit with motion sensors to help her take each step.
Loads of times I thought, I don't know if I'm going to make it. In other challenges I've done, I've always felt fairly confident I'd make it, but this time I've had a few problems with sores and My training was poor because I'm 16 weeks pregnant. I had a lot of morning sickness.
And it's not Claire's first challenge. In 2012, 16 days after starting the race, Claire became the first person to complete the London Marathon in a bionic suit, raising more than £80,000. And in 2013, here she is in training for a 400-mile hand bike ride from Nottingham to London. Incredibly, though, she says this latest race was even tougher.
Just kept looking at my feet and have to really concentrate to walk anyway. So I was just think of what I'm doing. I did catch a foot a few times when the ground gets slightly uneven, but I'm just so pleased to be finished as well. It's been the hardest 5 days, honestly. I'm so tired.
So now Claire says she needs to go home and relax, both mentally and physically, but it won't be for too long, because next on the list is her motorbike licence. Frankie McCamley, BBC News.
Remarkable lady. Now, time for a look at the weather. Stav is here and the word hot appears on the map.
It does indeed, Simon. Not for everyone, though, as this depicts. You can see it's a clear east-west split across the country through the course of this week. Areas of the UK closer to the near continent enjoying that heat and humidity. For some, it's not for everyone, though, it has to be said. Now, the reason for it, high pressure, which is delivering a lot of the heat from the near continent, moving across the south and the east. The northwest, though, pictures like that in Troon, wet and windy, whereas the far southeast, this picture depicts pretty much what's going on at the moment. And if we look at the temperatures, we could see the peak of the heat tomorrow, 31 Celsius in one or two places across the southeast, but those temperatures will be falling away as the week wears on. This weather front is responsible with bringing the cloud and the rain across much of the north and the west of the UK. Some heavy bursts mixed into it across the Highlands in towards Argyll, the odd heavy burst as well for Northern Ireland. Eastern Scotland probably faring best, a little bit of brightness here and there, for example, on the Murray coast. But ahead of that weather front, there'll also be quite a blanket of cloud, northwest England, Wales, the southwest, the odd spot of rain. The further east that you are, drier, but not completely dry. I've got a few rogue showers across the southeast. A few of them have been across the London area in the last hour or so. But we'll see highs of 25 degrees likely across the southeast. Those temperatures will continue to rise. And through the night, it stays pretty similar with the north and the west holding on to that weather front. So here, further drab conditions, quite breezy too. But you'll notice those temperatures across a large part of England and Wales, high teens Celsius, so becoming more and more uncomfortable at night. There's the weather front again, plaguing the north and the west corner of the UK, bringing further showery rain here. We could even see a few heavy thundery downpours for the southwest of England in towards Wales, but further central and eastern areas, the best of the sunshine and the warmth. A little bit of high cloud here and there, a bit of uncertainty to how much they'll be, but likely to make 30, 31 Celsius, the London area up towards East Anglia. And then look at that for Tuesday night, a really uncomfortable one likely across much of the Midlands in towards the southeast, a little bit fresher for the north and the west. On Wednesday, our weather front's pushed a little bit further out west, so it looks like some of the brightness could spread in towards eastern parts of Northern Ireland, maybe southern Scotland as well. But another hot day for the time of year for bulk of England and Wales. Could see a few thunderstorms, though, spreading up across the southwest. By Friday, a weather front spreads across the UK to bring fresher conditions with sunshine and showers to many. Temperatures actually turning nearer to normal, Simon.
Stan, thank you very much. A reminder of our top story this lunchtime. Hillary Clinton cancels a campaign trip to California after being diagnosed with pneumonia. That's all from us. Now, BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. From me, good afternoon.